For a moment, imagine the world holding its breath. Humbart redness to morning.
No warning, no countdown, no scientific explanation.
Just a strange, silent flicker, like the universe skipping a frame. And then, gravity turns off. Not weakens, not fluctuates, it completely shuts down. Within the first second, the entire planet erupts into chaos. Every object not bolted, welded, or rooted into the ground suddenly begins to drift upward. Cars slide off roads as if the Earth has become a giant space station. People stumble, then float, their feet leaving the pavement as panic spreads across cities. Water breaks free from oceans, rising like enormous shimmering walls, forming vast spherical blobs of liquid hovering above the surface. Rivers peel away from their beds. Lakes lift into the air. Even the atmosphere itself begins to loosen, expanding outward now that nothing is holding it tightly to Earth. Inside skyscrapers, furniture gently rises from floors. Elevators hang motionless in their shafts. Entire buildings groan, not from weight, but from the sudden absence of it. Airplanes in flight veer upward uncontrollably, their engines useless as they drift like fallen leaves in a vacuum of direction. Birds, insects, dust, smoke, every tiny thing begins floating, filling the sky with swirling chaos. The world becomes a slow motion explosion, everything rising at once, everything unanchored. And all of this happens within the first 10 seconds. Because for the first time in the 4.5 billion year history of the planet, Earth has no gravity at all. If this really happened for just 10 minutes, nothing about our world would ever be the same again. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your question below. So what exactly are we imagining here? This is not a world where gravity becomes weaker, or where the planet suddenly loses mass, or where Earth drifts away from the sun. Instead, we're exploring a far more impossible, but scientifically fascinating thought experiment. What if gravity, the fundamental force that holds everything to the ground, simply turned off for 10 minutes? Of course, in real physics, gravity isn't a switch. It's a curvature of space-time created by mass. Turning it off would essentially mean rewriting the laws of the universe. But what if scenarios aren't about realism? They're about understanding how deeply our world depends on forces we almost never think about. Gravity shapes everything: oceans, weather, mountains, ecosystems, your bloodstream, and even the air you breathe. It keeps Earth's atmosphere attached, guides rivers downhill, and allows your heart to pump blood the right way. So in this video, we're going to walk through what would really happen, scientifically, physically, and visually, if that force disappeared for only 10 minutes. Not weakened, not reversed, completely gone. We'll explore what happens in the first chaotic seconds. How different parts of the planet react, the pain reaction that spirals out as everything begins to drift away. And finally, what the world looks like after gravity returns. This scenario might sound fun at first: floating, humans, drifting cars. But the deeper science behind it is far more shocking. The moment gravity shuts off, the world enters a strange new physical reality. One where every force we normally ignore suddenly becomes dominant. The first major consequence: momentum takes over. Gravity usually keeps everything grounded, but without it, momentum becomes the new ruler of Earth. Objects don't just float upward peacefully, they drift in the last direction they were moving, even if that motion was tiny. A cup on a restaurant table begins sliding sideways because someone bumped the table moments earlier. A pen rolls off a desk but doesn't drop. It keeps rolling through the air, floating in a straight line like it's in orbit. Even dust particles, which normally settle to the ground, now spread into the air like a thin, shimmering fog. People who are walking keep drifting forward after their feet leave the ground, unable to stop without grabbing onto something. A running child lifts into the air and continues, hurtling forward horizontally, screaming in confusion. Someone jumping, even lightly, rises like a balloon and never comes back down. Vehicles become flying projectiles. Cars drifting upward isn't even the worst part. Vehicles moving at high speeds, especially on highways, become dangerous. Floating missiles. A bus going 80 km won't just stop without friction or gravity, it will glide forward indefinitely, rising slowly as the Earth rotates underneath it. Airplanes lose all sense of direction. With no gravity pulling them downward, they no longer need lift, and their wings become useless. Pilots desperately try to control them, but the slightest tilt sends planes drifting into uncontrolled tumbling rotation. Straight into floating sea. Water behaves even more dramatically. Oceans don't instantly fly into space, they first expand upward, forming massive bulbous shapes. Waves freeze mid motion, curving into strange loops. Water pulled by tides, wind, or currents continues moving in bizarre, spiraling patterns. You would see impossibly huge, shimmering blobs of ocean water drifting above sea level, some the size of skyscrapers.
L'atmosphere begins to slip away.
Air itself starts moving outward. Not violently at first, but steadily like steam escaping a pod. Earth begins losing the very thing that makes life possible. And we're still only in the first minutes. When gravity disappears, the second major wave of consequences begins to unfold, and this one strikes the planet on every level, from the air above us to the crust beneath our feet. The atmosphere, normally held tightly to Earth, starts leaking into space like a slow, silent explosion. Air pressure begins dropping within minutes. Breathing becomes harder, clouds scatter into thin vapor, and ones vanish entirely. Oxygen stretches outward into a hazy shell surrounding the planet, thinning the air so quickly that people feel lightheaded and disoriented. Even inside buildings, the pressure drop is noticeable, and emergency systems activate in hospitals and sealed facilities, though none are designed for an event affecting the entire globe. As the air escapes upward, the Earth's crust begins reacting in unexpected ways. Gravity is what keeps the crust compressed. Without it, tiny expansions ripple through the ground. These shifts are small but powerful, triggering micro-earthquakes, releasing trapped gases, and altering the pressure beneath volcanoes. Some volcanic systems erupt earlier than they should, not because gravity holds them down, but because the sudden change in internal pressure destabilizes them. Meanwhile, human and animal bodies struggle to function in this new physics. Without gravity pulling fluids downward, blood rushes upward, making faces swell and vision blur. Hearts strain, nausea hits almost instantly, birds can no longer fly, fish drift out of their tanks, and even insects lose all sense of orientation. Finally, human structures begin failing across the globe. Elevators freeze in mid-shaft, cranes collapse sideways, power lines stretch unnaturally, and dams begin to malfunction as water escapes in floating spheres. Plumbing systems burst into chaos, sinks and toilets spit water into drifting globes that float down hallways. The world's infrastructure, biology, and environment unravel all at once, each failure feeding into the next. 10 minutes without gravity doesn't just create momentary chaos, it leaves behind a disaster that will reshape Earth for decades. The moment gravity flicks back on, everything that was floating instantly accelerates downward. Cars, buses, streetlights, shattered debris, and millions of tons of ocean water all fall at the same time, hitting the ground or sea with catastrophic force. The massive bulges and suspended blobs of water above the oceans collapse like falling mountains, triggering mega tsunamis that smash into coastlines without warning. People and animals who drifted upward during the weightless window fall uncontrollably, some from rooftops, some from trees, some from dozens or even hundreds of meters in the air. Buildings, already stressed by the absence of weight, suddenly have to support their full mass again, plus the impact of falling debris, many collapse on the spot. The atmosphere, which had begun slipping away into space, now slams back toward Earth unevenly, creating brutal winds and violent pressure imbalances. These sudden atmospheric collapses spark chaotic storms and swirling vortices across continents. Meanwhile, the Earth's crust, which had subtly expanded during the weightless period, compresses again with immense force, triggering earthquakes across multiple fault lines. Some volcanoes erupt explosively as shifting pressures violently squeeze magma chambers. The long-term damage is immense. Coastlines are redrawn, ecosystems collapse, oxygen levels fluctuate unpredictably, and global weather patterns remain chaotic for years. Many regions face temporary oxygen shortages, making them dangerous to inhabit. For generations, scientists would study the scars left behind by these 10 impossible minutes, a brief window where the laws of the universe failed and Earth paid the price. For 10 minutes, Earth entered a reality that defied every law holding our world together. With gravity gone, the atmosphere began leaking into space, oceans rose like living creatures, buildings twisted under their own shifting structure, and every living being experienced a sudden, horrifying loss of biological stability. People floated helplessly, vehicles became uncontrollable projectiles, and nature itself unraveled in silence. But the true devastation began when gravity returned, because everything suspended in the air came crashing down at once. Massive walls of water collapsed into the oceans, creating destructive mega tsunamis. Air rushed downward in chaotic waves, triggering storms and violent pressure fluctuations. The planet's crust snapped back into place, igniting global earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. In seconds, the world transformed from surreal weightlessness to catastrophic impact. In the aftermath, coastlines changed shape, ecosystems shattered, and global weather systems spiraled into long term instability. The environment suffered wounds that would take decades, perhaps centuries, to heal. Humanity would never forget the terrifying moment when the most reliable force in the universe simply failed, even briefly, and it would serve as a reminder of how fragile our existence truly is, balanced on forces we take for granted every second of our lives. Because in the end, the question isn't just what would happen if gravity turned off for 10 minutes. It's how unthinkably dependent our world is on laws we never see, never feel, and never expect to vanish.